As we look to our text today, we are continuing a series called I Am. We're looking at the 7 I Am statements of Jesus. We know, yes, he was a good teacher. Yes, he was a prophet, but we believe that he was the Son of God. These 7 statements are 7 intentional times where he starts to pull the curtain back to see that. So today, let's look at one of those statements. John 10, starting in verse 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus again said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture.
Let's pray together. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your word, because it is in your word, God, where we hear from you. And God, it's through your word, by your Spirit, God, that you connect truth to areas of our lives that are often have much brokenness, have much need. And yet, God, you bring and breathe life into those areas. And God, I know that you want to do that in my life, and you want to do that in each one of our lives this morning. And so, God, I just pray to that end, God, that you would carry your word to the minds and hearts of your people, and God, that fruitfulness would occur. God, that whether that fruitfulness is for the first time hearing the good news of Jesus, and turning to Jesus and trusting in him for the first time, or whether it's for some of us the 1,000th time, where we need to turn to him again after a week or a season of wandering, or just a moment of wandering. We just want to turn to you and turn back to you and just confess you as Savior and as Lord of our lives. God, I pray, God, you would do all of that work in each of our lives this morning. And as we just continue to pray, just take a moment and pray for yourself. Pray for yourself that God would speak to you individually this morning. And if you also take a moment, pray for me. Pray that I would be clear and that our time together would be helpful. Well, God, we love you, and we trust you, and we ask you to use this time for our good and for your glory. And all God's people said, amen. Well, good morning again. So glad you're here. If you happen to be a guest this morning, we're just especially glad you're here. We'd love for you, just so you know, this is in the chair back in front of you. If that would bless you, if you want to get on our radar and have us reach out to you, just fill that out. You can do it online as well. We'd love to reach out to you. But again, we're in John 10, 1 through 9 this morning, which, if you're not there, turn there. But a surprisingly fun Google search is famous front doors. So take that and apply it however you'd like, but behold, a few famous front doors. So as you put one up, whether you're just like, anybody? Yes, Lord of the Rings. It just makes you just want to go take a nap in a field with your feet being all hairy. That's Lord of the Rings. Sorry, that was kind of gross, but let's do the next one. Yeah. Friends, right? I'm not a huge Friends guy, and yet even I remember as a teenager, like coming home from school, eating cereal and having Friends on TBS or whatever it was, and seeing that door. It's like a character in that show. But you got the next one. Anybody familiar with that one? May or may not be. Just imagine Julia Roberts standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her. Anybody? Big movie in our world growing up. It's Notting Hill, Hugh Grant, Julie Roberts. Maybe this will land on, this next one will land. Thank you, Alex, coming in hot for the front row, bro. Yes, Harry Potter fans just don't speak in tongues or parcel tongue, whatever. It'll be confusing. But that's from Harry Potter. And this last one, anybody familiar with this last one? 10 Downing Street. Very good. So this store, I want to take a moment and talk to you about this store for a second because it's kind of interesting. It's a lot of history. This is where the Prime Minister of England resides. It was designed originally in 1772 with this beautiful, obviously thick oak wood door. But in 1991, just down the street, the IRA set off a pipe bomb. And so they decide, wisdom led them to think, to replace that wood door with a bulletproof replica. And so the original door, it also had this nice little letter opener, or we can kind of drop letters off. That is now just for show, lest someone drops something a little bit more nefarious in the Prime Minister's house. On top of that, the door, the little keyhole is completely cosmetic because this door, there is a 24/7 guard on the inside that they have to open the door. You can only open the door from the inside. No one from the outside can get inside. Only the guard lets in whoever the Prime Minister wants or the Prime Minister himself. Why do I mention these weirdo doors to you? This morning, as Logan mentioned, we're moving through these I am statements, these moments where Jesus attaches that label, I am, which is incredibly loaded with meaning for first century, for Jewish peoples. And anyone who has a Jewish heritage, they recognize that moment in the burning bush when God says, I am who I am. In John 8, Jesus explicitly ties that title to himself. And these I am statements, Jesus says, I am, and then he fills it with some sort of idea, some sort of picture. And he's wanting us to understand something about himself. And he often ties it to different areas of our lives so that we need him to speak life into. And so this morning in John 10:9, Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. I'm not sure if you've thought about this, but doors kind of show up all over the Bible in certain ways. It'd be an interesting thing to just do a Bible study on famous doors in the Bibles. For example, remember in Genesis 3, Adam and Eve, they sin and they're kicked out of the garden, and God places 2 angels in front of the entrance to the garden. And they have flaming swords, and it's blocking the door. You also remember Noah's Ark, that story, right? God tells Noah to build this massive boat for him, his family, all these animals. And remember, there's one door to the boat. And as Noah and his family and all these animals are safely in the boat, what does it say? It says God shuts the door. Incredible thing to hear. Even the temple where our building has fire code and multiple entrances and exits, the temple, it had one. It had one gate into the courtyard. And then there was a special door leading into the Holy of Holies. There was this thick curtain, and only the high priest would pass through that door, and he would only do so once a year on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement. And he would sprinkle blood of a sacrificed lamb on the mercy seat. And if anyone tried to enter the Holy of Holies any other day or any other way, they would be struck dead on the spot. Man, wild. Suffice it to say, in the Bible, doors are kind of a thing. It's kind of a big deal. And this makes Jesus' claim to be the door, when he says, I am the door, it's a little bit more significant in that context. And yet the question that we're wanting to get at this morning is, what is Jesus wanting us to know? What is Jesus telling us? And so we're going to read the text again from beginning to end, but for our context, just to remember, here's a profound statement. John 10 comes after John 8 and 9. Wow, write that one to people down. John 10 comes after John 8 and 9. Thank you. Whatever. But it comes after the events of John 8 and 9, and so which is, remember these from last week, the woman caught in adultery, and Jesus, he gives sight to a blind man. In both of these moments, think about this. the Pharisees, they responded very differently than Jesus. They responded profoundly negatively. They were cold and they were callous to the woman that was caught in this embarrassing act of adultery. She's so vulnerable. They resented Jesus and his power to heal a blind man. And these stories they set the stage for this moment in John 10. You see that these interactions with John 8 and 9, they give this contrast. They show the contrast, the strong difference between Jesus' heart for these people and these Pharisees. They have no heart for these people. And then here comes John 10. It's that backdrop, we read these words starting in verse 1. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters the door by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they don't know, but they will flee from him, for they don't know the voice of strangers." And then verse 7, it says, "So Jesus again said to them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture.'" And then verse 10 is worth adding on. "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly." What is Jesus talking about? Let's take a moment and talk about sheepfolds. I know you guys are just wanting to talk about this morning. So you guys, give the people what they want, Colin. Okay, sheepfolds, we'll talk about it. No, so sheepfolds, there were two types in the first century. You had city ones, and then you had country ones. You could call it West County ones and way out in the hura bushes ones. That's the technical term for these. The Hebrew, don't worry about it. I'm just kidding. But let's talk about the West County sheepfolds. The city sheepfolds, they were big and they were communal. So think size, big, lots of different sheep from lots of different shepherds. Shepherds they'd bring their flocks at night, and so there would actually be a paid watchman there. He'd guard the flock by night, so the shepherd would go, get some rest, hang out with his shepherd buddies, go to Buffalo Wild Wings, whatever shepherd do at night, they would go in their downtime. And in the morning, the shepherd would then come, and then he would separate his sheep from the rest of the sheep. So how on earth would that happen? Great question. It reminds me of this moment. My daughters Audrey and Kate, they have performed on the Fox Theater with the Nutcracker. And so I'm in the Fox, I'm in the audience, and I'm using my bad eyes trying to find my kids, and all I see are a bunch of dainty little girls dressed in the same way with the same makeup on. I'm just like, is that Audrey? Is that Kate? And there's been several times where I'm following around some poor, unfortunate little girl. I'm like, that's not Kate. And yet I'm just following around some random little girl. So this is a similar moment for a shepherd. How in a sheep pen filled with different sheep would he gather all of just his sheep to himself? Sheep, as dumb as sheep are, they actually have impeccable hearing. They've got bad eyesight, bad decision-making, bad a lot of things, but they have remarkably good hearing. And so simply put, the shepherd would just call out to his sheep, and the sheep would respond, and the rest, they would stay put. They wouldn't go to that shepherd, only the shepherd's sheep would come to him. And so what would happen in this setting, thieves would try and would step into this space, they'd try and dress up like the shepherd, impersonate him, and they could usually fool the guard at the gate, but the real issue was tricking the sheep, because the sheep, they would recognize the shepherd's voice, and a stranger's voice they would not listen to. It's kind of a beautiful, beautiful thing. And Jesus, he's grabbing this analogy, right? When he says, my sheep, they recognize my voice, and they follow my voice. They won't follow a stranger's voice. This is what he's talking about. So this is the city, the West County sheepfolds. What about the ones way out in the hura bushes, the country ones? I've got a picture of them. This is a country sheepfold. And so first glance, it's not Fort Knox. Can we just agree on that? I mean, Walls aren't super big, doesn't even have a proper door. What would happen, though, is that the shepherd would sit right there. In other words, the shepherd was the door. And he would keep wild animals, he'd keep thieves out, and I know what you're thinking, I could hop that fence. And if you're thinking that, then yes, you probably could. If you're not, then you know your place. But if you're thinking I could probably hop over that, yes, but then you get in the pen, what's the plan? Getting that big fat sheep over even that small wall was an issue. But at least, and then they'd be loud and they'd be, and then the shepherd would get up and that's the actual, never mind, sorry. Thank you. You said that's pretty good. That's funny. No, we don't need that. We don't need that. But even if you get in the pen, the only way out is through the shepherd, through the door. And so in verse 1, Jesus, he talks about this. He talks about people who enter the sheepfold outside the door. They enter another way. And Jesus is clear, that person is a thief and a robber. And he's talking about the Pharisees. They're like thieves. They're approaching the sheep. They're approaching the people, but they're bypassing Jesus and they're trying to imitate the voice of a shepherd. But Jesus says, my sheep, they know my voice. And then in verse 7, he says, why? He says, again, he said to them, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Verse 9, I am the door, he repeats. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. And so what do we want to grab from this text about Jesus as the door? What does that mean for us? I want to point out 3 things for us this morning. The first is probably the most explicit one, is that Jesus is the only way for salvation. Jesus is the only way for anyone and everyone to be saved. Jesus is the door. Think about these Old Testament analogies, these Old Testament doors. Jesus is the gate back to Eden. Jesus is the one entrance into the ark of safety. Jesus is the one entrance to the temple. He's the one entrance into the presence of God, the holiest of holies. Jesus is the door to God's pasture that is salvation. And again, that's not just something earth-shattering. You're going to hear that in church. And yet, I want to acknowledge a couple of different issues or problems that the world that we live in is going to have with that simple statement. This statement that Jesus is the only way for salvation, it's problematic in our world for a couple of reasons. The first is that we live in a world where most of the world seeks salvation elsewhere. And what I mean by this is look at Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. Verse 14, he says, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few. Isn't that interesting? Jesus is describing the world that we live in. And what is he saying? The world that we live in a world filled with people running through a big, massive door that leads to destruction. To destruction. They're running through a door, hoping that on the other side of this particular door, there's peace, there's fulfillment, there's satisfaction, there's joy, acceptance. There are all sorts of different words you could, put that they're seeking on the other side of that door. But the reality is people, they're running through this big, wide door looking for salvation. They're looking to satisfy a deep longing in their soul, yet the reality is they're doing it wrong. They're running to something. They're running through a door that is not going to satisfy that. It's not going to do it. So just think through me. Just think about our world for a moment. What are different manifestations of doors that people run to seeking salvation, seeking life, seeking safety? It reminds me of something that came to my mind this past week, because I mentioned last week, most of us did not have power. And so I'm so grateful, by the way, for you all, because you guys reached out to us and are vulnerable. Like, we've got a newborn and we don't have power. And so grateful for Scott and Pam for giving us a generator. I was reluctant to take them up on it because I was just thinking our power's going to come back. It's going to come back. And that was Sunday, and we didn't get it back till Wednesday, and it was just wild. And so I'm so grateful for that. But I remember just sitting in the dark, and even with a generator, just having to be able to lamp, there was this weight that was on me, and it was just so heavy. And I remember praying something specifically in that moment. I was like, God, I pray that this lack of power does not bum me out too much. Because, like, what? Do you know what I mean when I say that? Like, because yes, all of us lost our power, and it objectively stinks. It's inconvenient. You have to eat out a lot. At least we did. It's not awesome. It's expensive. The house got a mess, and so you can make a list, right, of how it's, why is it not awesome to lose your power? And while Christians, we should not go off the rails in anger, we're not expected to just be stoic, emotionless robots and just saying, hey, Bob, how was your week? Hey, Dan, my week is terrible and I don't have power and my dog died, but I'm great. Like, that's not what the Christian life is supposed to be. It's okay for us to be bummed out, right? It's okay for us to be downcast and be tired. That's okay. But I remember praying, God, I don't want to be too downcast. God, I don't want to be too affected by this. I don't want to be too affected by this difficult moment, because if my power goes out, or just insert any sort of difficult circumstance, if I lose my job, if you get bad grades in a class, if your plans change abruptly against your will, if you lose a friend or a relationship or a loved one, or you're in this really uncomfortable moment, whatever it is, in that moment, if you're just consumed with anger and bitterness, and you just lose all hope, and you're just consumed with despair, and you just erupt in fury, that is not a good thing. That is something else entirely. That type of response, it should lead us to ask, am I looking to this thing for a sense of safety that I'm meant to have in God? Am I looking to this to save me in some shape or form? Am I treating this thing as if it's a door for me to my salvation? You see that? It's a tricky conversation because it's a hard issue. Whenever I think about this conversation, I want to be so clear. It is a hard issue. And anybody watching March Madness? Of course you're not, because we live in Missouri and Mizzou. It was sad and it was really depressing. And Texas A&M wasn't much better, and I'm not sure where else all of you are rooting for, but I just think about these guys. I think about the amount of time that it takes for them to be excellent at their craft. And so just think about two guys, and both of them are spending the same amount of time together at practice. Both of them are going the same amount of time towards games. They're both working out after hours. They're doing all these different things to be excellent at their craft. And so externally, these guys they look the same, and yet for one of them, basketball for them could be a door to their salvation. They could look for it to satisfy some deep longing in their soul, and the other person, it's not a door to their salvation. Jesus is their door, and it's just something that they happen to be good at. They do it for the glory of God. Outwardly, they look the same, but inwardly, they can have drastically different realities. You see that? That's the nature of this issue. It's a heart issue. And so Jesus is clear. The door to life and salvation, it's small. It's small. It's difficult. And Jesus says, I'm the door. It's me. Which leads to another issue in our world, the exclusivity of Jesus' claim. This is an incredibly narrow statement, an incredibly exclusive claim. It's a very popular belief that I would venture to guess many people at your school or workplace that they would aspire to some version of this, but it's basically saying that God is like a mountain, and that there are many ways to the top, and that one person might be going this way, another person might be going this way, but they're all going to the same direction. And so if some person goes this way, that's fine, but if another person goes that way, it's fine. They have slightly different rules, different words, and yet they're all going to the same spot. That is a really nice sentiment. I mean, the 9 Enneagram in me really likes the inclusiveness of that statement, and yet that's not what Jesus says. He doesn't say that I'm a gate. In John 14:6, in a few weeks, he's not a truth. He's not a way. He's not a way to life. He says, I'm the gate. Singular. It's a very exclusive statement. And it's just a difficult thing for the people that we, in the world. Anyone that tells you otherwise, whether on TV, like that person is a liar. It reminds me of a conversation I had with some friends a summer. This is the summer of 2007. And so I was in college, and I had this weird job. I was working at Texas Instruments in Dallas in their child care department. What? I mean, this was a random job, but it weirdly ticked some boxes for me. Like I was able to I worked well with kids, and I was getting paid, and I was able to spend the summer with Mallory. That was like literally my values. It was like, be with Mallory, make it a money, don't hate the job, right? But it was a secular work environment, and so I worked with several non-Christians. And yet, when I told them I went to Dallas Baptist University, it was, your faith comes up pretty naturally because of that. And so my faith in Jesus came up in conversation a lot. And I remember several things from that summer. The first is that, one, these were lost people, okay? So lost people do lost things. You don't need me to elaborate that. And so I saw lostness up close and personal, but then at the same time, I saw them, they kind of respected me as a Christian, which I did not expect. Like whenever I talk about my faith and how Jesus changed my life and how following Jesus was affecting how Mallory and I went about dating, for me to share those things, it took some courage. I partially expected some ridicule and some insults on the other side of me sharing that, but they seemed to respect it. I think I just was like, I wasn't like, I kind of follow Jesus. I was like genuinely all in, and I was just being authentic. I think they appreciated that. And so, but their positive reactions to this, the whole summer I'm thinking, oh man, all these people about to get saved. They're all gonna get saved. And I just played it out in my mind. I was like, these people, they're gonna come to me and say, Colin, what must do to be saved? Please, sir, help us. And I'm just be like, oh, sit down, my young Padawans. And I'm gonna share the gospel, and they're gonna just be skipping down the aisle at church, and they're gonna give me a plaque that says, Colin, best Christian ever. It's gonna be a trophy, and I was gonna be so great. I just was convinced I was killing it, and all these people about to get saved. And the summer was winding down. I was like, okay, Colin, time to seal the deal, right? You know, I wasn't that weird, but like that's what I was thinking, some version of that. And I remember saying, hey guys, I think you guys need to trust in Jesus. Do you guys want to trust in Jesus? And they said very politely, no thanks. No thanks. And I was like, and I kind of just paused, I was like, what? Like what? And they was like, yeah, that whole religion thing is not really for me. And I was like, it's not about a religion. It's about a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was like, I thought I talked about that, this whole thing. But they just said, I'm glad you found your way. I found one person in particular saying, hey, I feel really good on my way. And I said something like, I was like, maybe I wasn't clear. I forget what his name was. It's clearly I wasn't doing it. I wasn't just killing him if I forget his name. But I says, maybe I wasn't clear. John 14:6, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. John 10:9, Jesus is the gate. He's the only way. And I remember when I said that, the air in the room changed. Because they said, surely you're not saying that your belief about God is the only correct way. And I'm saying I kind of am saying that. And yet I'm not really saying it, Jesus is saying it. And when they heard that, everything changed. Like their demeanor, like I was dead to them. They said something like, that's the most arrogant, closed-minded, exclusive statement I've ever heard. And it was an uphill battle from there. But don't worry, they all got, I don't know they all got saved, but it was just this moment. I was just shocked, and I just saw my best Christian world just floating away in my mind. I was like, oh my goodness. That summer, I got a little bit more of a taste of who Jesus is and who he's claiming to be. He is not claiming to be a door. He is claiming to be the door, the only way. And it's very offensive in the world that we live in. And yet, it's interesting when you think about what is more arrogant for Jesus, God himself, to talk about how he saves, talk about the door, talk about his door to salvation, or actually are we the arrogant ones who think that we can get saved however we want, however we choose, just because we feel that way? Jesus is saying, I'm the door. He's the only way that anyone can be saved. And that's the first thing we need to get about from this statement, is that Jesus is the only way to salvation. The second thing I want you to see is that in Jesus, there's this promise of protection. There's this promise of protection. Again, he says, I'm the door. And then Jesus says, if anyone enters by me, he will be saved. And will go in and out and find pasture. So go back to that picture of the sheep pen if we've got it. Just imagine the life of a sheep. Imagine the threats on a sheep's life. It wasn't just robbers and thieves jumping that fence. There was predators that want to literally, devour them. And so Jesus says, when I'm the door, he's saying, I'm laying down my body in the doorway between you and danger. And nothing is getting into that pen without my say-so. And so just think, I'm going to try and save a little bit of this for Logan, which is next week, when Jesus says, I'm the good shepherd. But just think about how amazing it would be this next week for you to go about, how stabilizing it would be for you to go about knowing that whatever happens this next week, whatever comes through the pen door, the sheep pen door into your life, nothing's happening without the shepherd's permission. Whatever's coming in, the shepherd, if he's, just look at Psalm 84. This is a great psalm. He says, no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. What a verse. No good thing. God withholds no good thing from those who walk uprightly. Meaning that if he withholds something from you in your life this next week, then it's not really good, according to that verse. And if God allows something that you don't enjoy this week, we can know that he plans to use it for your good, because he does not withhold a good thing from you and I, his people. It's an important distinction to get, because for Jesus to promise you and I protection, it doesn't mean that you're not going to lose power, right? It doesn't mean that you're always going to get the job, or your relationship's always going to work out, or that healing's always going to come. Again, if a TV preacher tells you that, they are a thief and a liar. The promise is that in all of those things, all of those difficulties, when the power goes out, when the relationship goes sour, when you don't get the job, in all of those things, when the worst thing happens to you in life, in that moment, God says, I will use that for your good. That's the promise. And again, if you're in the middle of it right now, again, I don't pretend to know your stories, but if you are in the middle of something really crummy right now, I know it does not feel good. And yet in the midst of the pain, the promise is that we have a good shepherd who lays down his life for you, and whatever he lets into the pen of your life, he promises to work it for good. He's a good shepherd. So he promises protection. And then lastly, in Jesus, there is freedom and there is abundance. He says, I'm the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and go in and out and find pasture. You see that? Think about the sheep. Think about a sheep. He's able to go in the pen and out. Free range chicken, right? Whatever, that doesn't land or whatever. But in and out of the pen, that's freedom. Find pasture, that's abundance. He says this explicitly in verse 10. He says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. He says, I come that you may have it life abundantly. The Greek word there is perisos. It means over the top, as if to say, you follow Jesus, and you're going to have this just over the top life and blessings. And so the question that I think we need to think through is that, do we believe that? Do we believe that by following Jesus, that is the way where you and I can experience the best abundance that life has to offer? It reminds me of, sorry, Audrey, I got to share a story. It's in our last house in Arkansas. We had a bathroom whose bathroom handle was broken, okay? And so we had a great backyard, but the deal is that this go back to the backyard a second. The bathroom handle, if you went to the bathroom and closed the door, you could not get out of the bathroom. And so what we did, we learned to like keep the door cracked and kind of have this whatever, and it wasn't like this crazy issue, so I didn't fix it. Insert our backyard. We had this great backyard, and we're all just hanging outside, and Audrey's like five or six. And so, whereas now, for Audrey to disappear for 30 minutes is normal. At that point, for Audrey to disappear for 30 minutes, we're like, where's Audrey? And so the moment that Mallory goes back into the house, she hears Audrey just like banging on the door, just traumatized. And so I go to Lowe's and I fix the dadgum door. And to this day, Audrey does not like to be shut in the rooms. I'm just kidding. No, but I mentioned that because think about that bathroom, like going in and feeling like you're just suffocated and you're locked in. I'm afraid that some of us, when we think about surrendering our lives to Jesus, following Jesus, we don't think of that as the pathway to freedom and abundance in life. We think of it like that bathroom, this room where all of our freedoms get stifled, where we give up our plans, our ability to do what we want, with who we want, whenever we want, and we just can't do anything. And that's our version of the Christian life. And yet the reality is surrendering your life to Jesus, guys, that is true freedom. He's the shepherd that we're meant to know, and his pasture is where true life is found. It reminds me of an analogy that C.S. Lewis grabs. He says, where is a fish most free? It's not a trick question. He's basically saying you don't set a fish free by letting it prowl on the land. No, that will kill the fish. Little Mermaid falls apart, right? There's not life to be found up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day. No, that's where you die, little fish. Sorry, kids, whoops. But a fish is freest most, right? Swimming in the habitat that God made it to swim in. And so, simply put, you and I, we were made for Jesus. Colossians says we were made by Jesus and we were made for him. And we're always going to feel this sense of incompleteness, being off, unsatisfied, restless, until we finally submit our lives to him. Jesus is the shepherd who lays himself in the door of our lives. And he seeks not just to protect us from the thieves and robbers that want to harm us, but he places us between us and our sin. He places himself between us and our sin. And on the cross, Jesus sits at the door between us and our sin, and he absorbs the wrath of God in our place. And when he did, what happens? The curtain, right? The curtain in the Holy of Holies, it splits in two, and it symbolizes that Jesus' torn body is now the door back into the presence of God, the door back into the Garden of Eden, the door back to safety from God's judgment. And the way to walk through this door is simply by trusting in Jesus. One more story as we close. In 2013, I heard David Jeremiah talk about Houdini. At the time, he was one of the world's greatest escape artists. And he had been able to prove that he could get out of any sort of locked room or situation, except there was only one recorded instance where he failed to escape. I wonder if you know this story. But he was touring the British Isles, and in a small town, he was invited to escape a local jail cell. And it was so ordinary, and so Houdini thought, I'm gonna get out of this in like 30 seconds. And yet, after 2 hours of him trying to get out of this jail cell and pick the lock, he gave up, and finally, in exasperation, he just leaned on the door, and the door went open because it had never been locked to begin with. And I just love that story because I wonder how many of you, when you think about Jesus, how many of us stay imprisoned behind an unlocked door? Jesus' blood, it's unlocked the door to your freedom. All you got to do is just lean on him. Just lean on him. That day, Dr. Jeremiah, he said that one of the enemy's greatest deceptions is convincing us, like Houdini, that we have to work and we got to strive to unlock this door of salvation, to pick the lock, trying to earn God's love and through our good works. But all you're supposed to do is just lean on Jesus, just to lean on him. Salvation is not what we do to save ourselves. It's receiving what God has done for us. Salvation is not us trying, it's us trusting in the one who's perfect in our place. And so, how do you want to respond today? Do you need to do that today? Do you need to lean on Jesus and trust and just walk through this unlocked door that's just waiting for you to walk through? Yeah, we'll have prayer partners on my left and your right. If you just need someone to pray for you, if you need someone to talk, I'm going to be in the back. And perhaps you just need to sit and just let this idea of Jesus being the door just land on you. But I pray that by God's grace that he would work in you and help you see the way of salvation and help you see the way into pasture and an abundant life.